And welcome to the third in our series of short sessions on our lunchtime break. We are delighted today to be able to welcome two of the specialist nurses from the Freeman Hospital who work in the adult congenital service. We've got Kathryn and Sam McLaren who are going to take us through a presentation today, just talking about the turbulence of the adult experience of living with congenital heart disease. So thank you very much for joining us today, ladies, and I will hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, as Kay said, I'm Kathryn Moore and this is Sam McLaren, and we are part of the Adult Congenital Heart Disease Specialist Nurse team. And today we're going to talk about the challenges a congenital heart patient encounters whilst waiting for heart transplant on the urgent transplant list, staying in hospital. We're going to use a case study of one of our congenital patients that has gone through the heart transplant journey. Prior to this presentation, we have obtained the consent of the patient and she's happy for us to share her story with you. So Vicky is a 32-year-old female. She was born with complex congenital heart disease and she had several surgical procedures in childhood to create a single ventricle circulation. Vicky lived independently at home with her fiance and dog. She worked full-time and was looking forward to her wedding. Vicky's had multiple transplant assessments over the last 9 years. However, she was always deemed too well and remained asymptomatic and was therefore not listed for transplant, as she was still participating in light exercise. In early 2021, Vicky was referred from Nottingham with a failing single ventricle circulation and was at that point admitted to Freeman Hospital. Due to her clinical deterioration, Vicky had worsening heart failure and was subsequently listed for transplant in spring of last year. In October of 2021, Vicky received her transplant and she is now at home doing really well. Throughout the time that Vicky spent on the ward, she was on CCU where she waited for a transplant. She was unable to go home as she was Milverlone dependent and therefore wasn't allowed to leave the ward other than to go off for short periods because she was needing telemetry and close monitoring. Vicky also had a large amount of ascites and which they were unable to drain due to known abdominal collateral veins. This was estimated to be almost 15 litres of fluid, and Vicky only had a small frame anyway. Vicky also struggled with nutrition while she was an inpatient at the Freeman. She had a low weight, a low BMI, and she didn't like hospital food. This is something that we're going to later discuss in our talk. Vicky also had a lot of psychological impact while she was waiting for transplant. She had low mood, stress and anxiety about the unknown road ahead. Vicky also had poor exercise tolerance and she was restricted with a lot of her mobility and therefore struggled with that aspect as well. And then there was also the added aspect of COVID-19. So Vicky's hospital stay began at the beginning of the third lockdown, where there was no visitors allowed at all across the trust and limited visiting from family as they were from Nottingham, so they were only allowed up at the weekends once those COVID restrictions had been lifted.
Nutritional challenges. She had a low BMI and her medical team raised the concern, would she survive a transplant? She had loss of muscle bulk and little in the way of subcutaneous fat stores. She appeared cachexic and unable to manage effective exercise. Weight was estimated to be as low as 35 kilograms once her ascites was drained. Hospital food, the lack of choice. She didn't like the taste of the meals that she was used to from home. She loved normally for breakfast fresh eggs, poached eggs, but in hospital on the ward, only eggs available were powdered and were not to her liking. Limited mobility, she couldn't access the shop or canteen independently. She required the assistance of often the housekeeper or the healthcare from the ward. And this was a very busy CCU, and they were often unable to come with her. Diet again, she preferred fresh home-cooked meals, fruit, and loved poached eggs. Kitchen facilities, she was frustrated with her independence being taken away. She had recently moved into her own house with her fiance, and on the ward she was unable to prepare basic meals like beans on toast, reheat home cooked food, which she found quite frustrating. And it was the dietitian's options of high calorie, high protein was against everything she was used to doing previously. She enjoyed a healthy, balanced diet. NG feeding was mentioned to Vicky to try and build her up for her transplant. She wanted to increase her oral intake and have a go at increasing her weight herself. Supplements, she was on the Procal shots, build-up drinks, which she struggled with, but forced herself to have them. The catering team supplied vouchers for the restaurant, which helped a lot financially and to give her more options from what they had on the ward. Her fiance provided a mobility scooter, which again gave her more independence to go around the hospital, to go to Julia Smith's, to go to the fruit store, and to go down to the restaurant independently. Eventually, over a few weeks, the senior staff and the catering manager agreed to let Vicky use some of the staff kitchen area to prepare her own meals. She was motivated to improve her diet intake, and she tried really, really hard. Psychological impact pre-transplant. Vicky wasn't listed for transplant at the time of admission. This took about 2 months. Therefore, she had worries and concerns around the different surgical options. She was isolated from friends and family, especially at the early part of her journey, just coming out of the final lockdown. She had a meeting with matron, and it was decided, I think it was about April time, that's when her family were able to come in every other weekend. So it was her mum, dad, and fiance, and eventually over time as well, her dog Bonnie also visited her. Body image. So because of Vicky's large ascites, she was only able to wear maternity clothes. Often when we reviewed Vicky, she was distressed as members of the domestics or phlebotomists would ask Vicky if she was pregnant and congratulating her. This obviously distressed Vicky a lot. She was terrified and experienced varying periods of low mood. She had been in inpatients for 8 months. Vicky had developed strong relationships with other transplant patients who she had met in the corridor. And on one occasion, there was someone who she met who had been through transplant and who did really well and had gone home, who unfortunately came back in after spending a few days at home in a arrhythmia, and this patient needed a pacemaker, and the following day went for a pacemaker, and unfortunately this patient died having the procedure. Vicky was aware of this, and this was only a few weeks before herself got the offer for her transplant. Post-transplant, hang on, I'll go back. Whilst she was seeing the psychologist, she had complementary therapy arranged for her, and they provided a few massages over her few months waiting for transplant. This massively helped Vicky because the ascites cause pain all around her back and shoulders. So I think over her last few months, she had about 3 massages. Distraction and relaxation to help keep Vicky busy. Whilst waiting for transplant, she started making scrunchies and dog bandanas. She set up a little online shop on Etsy for my cubicle, and she was often posting on the Freeman transplant page. And she was soon taking orders for lots of different designs. And I remember her transplant was October, and she was making scrunchies in Halloween designs with pumpkins and witches and all kinds on. But she really enjoyed, and it felt like it gave her a purpose, and she raised funds for the transplant charity. Post-transplant, Vicky also encountered psychological issues. She had a period of time where she had paranoid delirium, so refused medication. She was refusing all cares. She was hallucinating, thinking the staff were plotting against our mum because she was in the flat accommodation at the back, and that our mum was doing something wrong and that she was going to get told off. All very real to Vicky at the time. After 2 weeks, she made it back to 38. And I think after a few days to a week of being there, she started having palpitations, irregular heart rhythms, which she was very tearful, very low in mood and anxious because of her previous experience of the person who she known who had palpitations. This took a long while for Vicky to understand it was a post-transplant regular thing that can happen, and not all patients are going to go on to develop to need a pacemaker. She was very scared and requiring lots of reassurance. Towards the end of November, it was time to move over to the flats. She was excited at the prospect of being home for Christmas. And she was home for Christmas, and she did make her Christmas lunch. And here is a picture of pre and post. Oh my God, it's flicking. Pre-transplant, and that's her dog Bonnie, and post-transplant in their matching PJs, looking very happy indeed.
We've actually seen Vicky this morning. She was in for a clinic appointment, and she was expressing how she's at home. She's living life to the full, very cautiously, but very to the full. She's been to the cinema to see Spider-Man. She's having friends over for a sleepover next week, and she'd also been out buying suits for the wedding, and she's doing really well. I'd just like to take this time to take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Is there any questions? I'll just open it up to the audience just briefly, see if anybody has any comments or anything to add. Yes, Emily?
I just want to say it was really great to see that, just in terms of the experience of a patient going through that process. And I just don't suppose it's not really a question, but it just really striking the things that the team around were doing just to try and bring in those really important aspects of her life, really, like whether it's the dog or the scrunchies, and like things that really make a massive difference, don't they, in terms of doing those things in hospital. But I'm also aware those can be really challenging things sometimes in terms of being able to bring those things in. So I guess my question, if I do have one, is, how was that in terms of being that process of being able to bring those other things in that are important in her life? How did the team manage to do such a great job of that, really?
I think initially it was quite difficult. But Vicky was, do I dare say it, was lucky compared to some of the current transplants we've got at the minute. She had her own cubicle, and she was a young girl, and she was very well liked, do I say, on the ward by the whole staff, and never caused any problems or any issues with, there was no problems with what Vicky was doing ever on her inpatient stay.
And also, as Vicky's confidence grew and she was more keen to get out with her pump and things, the team actually managed to get her out to the seafront, managed to take her out for a coffee, and that was something that just really lifted her mood. Simple things like that, just being able to change the environment, get that fresh air that she's probably not felt for so long. And I think she also went out for a coffee on another occasion as well.
We used to bring breakfast into her as well. There was lots of McDonald's deliveries, Dean and Daniela's, to keep her going.
I think it just made the importance of those little things really highlighted, that those things can make a big difference in a patient journey.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for that presentation. It was great.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I can't hear.
Sorry, Kay, we can't hear you.
Sorry.
So,
I think we've managed to take this congenital heart disease awareness week right from neonates on day 1 and Monday through that paediatric journey, right through to considering what that's like living as an adult with the disease and the outcomes of some of the complex diseases. So I really appreciate your input today, and excited to hear we've got Emily, who's just spoken there before, speaking tomorrow lunchtime session. So I look forward to seeing you all again there, and I look forward to hearing from you, Emily, just to round up our week considering the psychological impact of congenital heart disease. So I'll stop the recording there and say thank you so much to everybody who's joined us today. And if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thanks so much.